Okay, this is another day of doing interview questions and reading for 30 minutes to improve my articulation. So let's go. The aim here is to one, just to familiarize myself with common answers to interview questions, and meanwhile, it's just an opportunity to read as well. So yeah, let's get into it. So this is run 19, so the 19th time I've put in my prompt to ChatGPT for it to generate something to read basically. So this run is about values conflicts and forced trade-offs and situations where there's no perfect answer and the interviewers are listening for judgment, prioritization, and moral clarity, not heroics. So question one, tell me about yourself. I've learned to define myself by how I make trade-offs. Across healthcare placements, work, leadership roles, and sport, I've been in situations where not everything could be done perfectly. What mattered was deciding what to prioritize: safety, people, or learning. What mattered was what mattered was deciding what to prioritize: safety, people, or long-term outcomes, and standing by that choice. That focus on judgment over perfection has shaped how I operate and how I continue to grow. Question two. Tell me about a time your values conflicted with convenience. During a healthcare placement, there were moments when workload pressure made it tempting to move quickly rather than carefully. I noticed that slowing down to double check details slightly inconvenienced the team in the moment, but it aligned with my responsibility to patient safety. I chose accuracy over speed and communicated clearly why. That decision reinforced me. That that decision reinforced for me that values matter most when they cost you something. Question three. Describe a time you had to prioritize one person over another. In a team environment, I had to balance supporting an individual who was struggling with maintaining overall group performance. I chose to give that person additional support outside of peak moments rather than compromising standards during critical periods. That approach protected the team's performance while still supporting the individual, and it taught me that fairness doesn't always mean treating everyone the same. Question four. Tell me about a time you chose long-term growth over short-term comfort. Tell me about a time you chose long-term growth over short-term comfort. One example was continuing with demanding sport training, even when immediate results weren't improving. Short-term comfort would have been stepping back, but I recognized that staying disciplined would build resilience and mental strength. Hold on. Yeah, one thing I'm doing as well is that anytime I stumble over a sentence, I'm gonna try and just redo the sentence just because I want to build a habit of making sure everything I say comes across clear. Short-term comfort would have been stepping back, but I recognized that staying disciplined would build resilience and mental strength. That decision paid off in how I now approach pressure in other areas of life with patience rather than frustration. Question five. What do you do when loyalty and honesty are in tension? When loyalty and honesty conflict, I prioritize honesty delivered respectfully. In work and placements, in work and placement environments, I've learned that protecting relationships in the short term by avoiding difficult situations often causes bigger issues later. I aim to be clear, measured, and constructive rather than silent. That approach preserves trust while still addressing reality. Question six. Tell me about a time you had to accept an imperfect outcome. During a service role under pressure, we had to accept a good enough outcome rather than an ideal one due to time constraints. I focused on ensuring core standards were met and risks were minimized, even if the result wasn't polished. That experience taught me how to distinguish between what must be perfect and what simply needs to be sufficient. Question 7. What principle do you refuse to compromise on? I don't compromise on responsibility for my actions. Even when circumstances are difficult or shared, I believe in owning my part and learning from it. That principle has guided me across very different environments and is central to how I define professionalism. Okay, this is the next run, run 20 now. This run is centered on why this role and why now, without sounding rehearsed, desperate, or overly specific. These answers are designed to be adaptable to almost any field while still feeling grounded and genuine. Question 1. Why are you interested in this role? I'm interested in this role because it sits at the intersection of responsibility, learning, and impact. From my experience in healthcare placements, finance, service roles, and team environments, I've learned that I'm most engaged when my decisions matter and when there's a clear standard to work towards. This role offers that balance. It demands accountability while still allowing room to develop. I'm motivated by roles where progress comes from judgment and consistency rather than quick wins, and that's why this opportunity genuinely appeals to me. Question 2. Why now? Now feels like the right time because I've built enough range to know how I work and enough self-awareness to know what I still need to develop. Earlier experiences helped me test myself in different environments. More recently, I've become much more deliberate about reflection and improvement. That combination means I'm ready to commit more deeply, learn faster, and take responsibility seriously rather than just explore. I'm not looking for certainty. I'm looking for the right challenge. Question 3. What makes you suited to this role? What suits me to this role is how I handle responsibility under pressure. Across placements, work, and sport, I've learned to stay calm, prioritize well, and act within my limits while still being proactive. I don't rush to appear confident. I focus on being dependable. That approach helps me integrate quickly, build trust, and contribute meaningfully, even while I'm still learning. Question 4. Why should we choose you over other candidates? I think what differentiates me is how seriously I take development. I don't assume potential will carry me forward. I actively reflect on performance, seek feedback, and adjust my behavior. That habit has helped me grow across very different environments. You'd be choosing someone who is reliable early on and improves quickly over time, not just someone who performs well on day one. Question 5. What are you hoping to gain from this opportunity? I'm hoping to gain depth. I've had enough exposure to know what's real growth. I've had enough exposure to know that real growth comes from staying in an environment long enough to be challenged properly. I want to develop stronger judgment, better decision making, and a clearer sense of professional standards. This role offers the structure and responsibility that would allow that kind of growth. Question 6. What motivates you to perform well in roles like this? I'm motivated by being trusted. In healthcare, work, and team settings, I found that trust is earned through consistency, composure, and accountability. Performing well isn't just about outcomes for me, It's about knowing others can rely on me when it matters. That internal motivation keeps my standards high even when no one is watching. Question 7. Where do you see this role taking you? I see this role as a foundation rather than a finish line. My focus, my focus isn't on a fixed outcome, but on becoming more capable, more grounded, and more reliable over time. If I do that well, the next steps tend to become clearer. If I do that well, the next steps tend to become clearer naturally. Right now, I'm focused on learning properly, contributing responsibly, and earning the next opportunity rather than rushing towards it. Okay, now it's time for the next run. So the next run is run 21. This is a follow-up grilling. So interviewers challenge your previous answers, test consistency, and push for clarity. The goal is stability under scrutiny. Same person, same values, and sharper articulation. Question 1. You've talked a lot about responsibility. Give me a concrete example, not a generic. Give me a concrete example, not a general principle. A concrete example would be during a hospital placement when the pace increased unexpectedly due to staff shortages. I wasn't given additional authority, but I recognized that responsibility in that moment meant being reliable rather than ambitious. I focused on accuracy, anticipating what could be prepared next, and communicating clearly when something was outside my scope. Nothing dramatic happened, and that was the point. The team stayed supported, and patient safety was maintained. That's how I understand responsibility, doing the right small things consistently. Question 2. You say you're reflective. How do we know that's not just talk? One way reflection has shown up practically is in how I change my behavior after early service roles. One way reflection has shown up practically is in how I changed my behavior after early service roles. I realized that while I worked hard, my communication under pressure could be too task focused. I paid attention to how well I paid attention to how people responded, adjusted my tone, and became more deliberate about clarity and encouragement. The result was smoother teamwork and fewer issues overall. That shift only happened because I took time to analyze my own behavior honestly, not because someone forced the change. What's a skill you thought you had but realized you didn't? I initially thought I handled pressure well simply because I stayed busy. Through competitive sports, I realized that staying busy isn't the same as staying composed. Under real pressure, decision making and emotional control. Under real pressure, decision making and emotional control matter far more than effort alone. Recognizing that gap pushed me to work on mental discipline rather than just output. That adjustment changed how I now approach pressure in every setting. Question 4. If we spoke to the people you've worked with, what criticism would they give? They'd probably say that I can take time to fully engage verbally in new environments. I tend to observe first to understand the context, which can come across as reserved initially. Once I'm settled, I contribute more actively and consistently. I'm aware of that tendency and have been working on shortening that adjustment period by asking questions earlier and making my engagement more visible. Question 5. You've had varied experiences. What did you stop doing because of them? I stopped chasing quick validation. Earlier on, I was more focused on outcomes or recognition. Through healthcare placements and professional environments, I learned that reliability and judgment matter far more long term. That shift changed how I measure progress. I now focus on consistency and trust rather than immediate wins. I now focus on consistency and trust rather than immediate wins. Question 6. What worries you about taking on more responsibility? What I'm most conscious of is not overestimating readiness. Responsibility carries consequences, especially in environments involving people. I'm careful not to rush into roles without respecting the learning curve. That awareness doesn't hold me back. It helps me approach responsibility with humility and preparation rather than ego. Question 7. So what would make you a bad hire? I'd be a bad hire in an environment that values speed over judgment or optics over substance. I do my best work where standards matter, reflection is encouraged, and responsibility is taken seriously. In purely transactional environments, my strengths wouldn't fully be used. Where judgment, consistency, and growth matter, I add the most value. Again, next up is run 22. So this run is a full mock interview, start to finish, paced exactly like a real one. The answers are slightly longer where appropriate, with natural variation in depth, just as you deliver them live. Question 1. Let's start simply. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. I'm someone who's developed through responsibility rather than certainty. I've spent time across healthcare placements, finance, service roles, leadership positions, and sport. And what those environments had in common was that how you behave matters more than how confident you sound. Over time, I learned to stay calm under pressure, reflect honestly on my performance, and improve quickly without ego. I'm motivated by roles where judgment, consistency, and trust matter, and that's shaped how I approach my development so far. Question 2. What initially drew you to this kind of role? I was drawn to roles like this because they combine responsibility with learning. In healthcare placements and professional environments, I noticed I was most engaged when my actions had real consequences and there was a clear standard to work towards. I enjoy environments where you're trusted early, but expected to take ownership of your development. That balance keeps me focused and motivated over the long term. Question 3. Tell me about a time you demonstrated leadership. One example was in a competitive sports environment during a period where performance dropped and frustration started affecting morale. Rather than trying to motivate through words, I focused on stabilizing the environment. I raised standards through consistency in training, clear communication, and supporting teammates individually where needed. Over time, cohesion improved and performance followed. That experience taught me that leadership is often about creating calm and direction when confidence is low. Question 4. Describe a challenge you faced and how you handled it. A challenge I faced was adjusting to the pace and responsibility of healthcare placements early on. I initially felt pressure to be useful quickly, but I realized that rushing risked mistakes. I consciously slowed down, asked more questions, and focused on accuracy and communication. That adjustment improved both my confidence and quality of my contribution. It reinforced that good judgment often matters more than speed. Question 5. What would you say is one of your key strengths? One key strength is composure under pressure. Across demanding environments, whether so across demanding environments, whether service roles. Yeah, I think one thing I need to work on pronouncing is my R's. I feel like they come across a bit less sharp when I'm like pronouncing them. Across demanding environments, whether service roles, healthcare placements, or sport, I've learned to regulate my reactions and focus on what's actually needed. That steadiness helps teams function better and build trust over time. It's a strength that tends to show most when situations aren't going smoothly. Question 6. And what's a weakness you're actively working on? A weakness I've been working on is contributing earlier in unfamiliar settings. I naturally like to observe first to understand context, which can sometimes delay my input. I become more intentional about asking questions and sharing thoughts sooner while still being thoughtful. That balance has made me more effective and visible in teams. Yeah, now as I say, like one thing I do like is the way it kind of structures its answers. Like, yeah, like the initial part is to like kind of answer the question directly. The middle part, which kind of like makes it make sense to the interviewer, so they actually fully understand your answer. Then the last like 1 to 2 sentences is kind of just like a key takeaway, which I do like. And that's definitely like a structure that I'll be adopting. Question 7. Tell me about the time something didn't go to plan. One example was a self-directed project where I underestimated how much planning and validation was needed. You have to drink some water. One example was a self-directed project where I underestimated how much planning and validation was needed up front. When progress stalled, I stepped back and analyzed what was missing rather than pushing harder. I realized my approach needed more structure and research. Less experience improved my judgment and made me more deliberate about how I assess opportunities going forward. Question 8. How do you work within a team? I focus on awareness and reliability. In team settings, I pay attention to what the group needs rather than just my own tasks. That might mean supporting others, communicating clearly under pressure, or adjusting my approach to suit different personalities. I found that consistency and emotional control contribute more to team performance than individual flashes of effort. Question 9. Why should we choose you? You should choose me if you're looking for someone who takes development seriously. I don't assume potential will carry me. I reflect on performance, seek feedback, and adjust my behavior deliberately. I don't assume potential will carry me. I reflect on performance, seek feedback, and adjust my behavior deliberately. That habit has helped me grow across very different environments. You'll be getting someone who is dependable early on and improves quickly over time. Question 10. Where do you see yourself going from here? I see this stage as about building depth rather than chasing a specific outcome. My priority is becoming more capable, more grounded, and more reliable over time. If I do that well, the next steps tend to become clearer naturally. Right now, I'm focused on learning properly, contributing responsibly, and earning future opportunities rather than rushing them. And earning future opportunities. Oh no, let me stop in the start of the sentence. Right now, I'm focused on learning properly, contributing responsibly, and earning future opportunities rather than rushing towards them. Question 11. Is there anything else you'd like us to know? One thing I'd add is that I'm very intentional about how I grow. I don't just collect experiences, I reflect on them, extract lessons, and carry those forward. That shaped how I handle responsibility, pressure, and uncertainty. It's also why I'm confident stepping into new challenges, even when I don't have all the answers up front. Okay, let's move on to the next set, set number 23. This round focuses on identity under pressure, credibility without credentials, and how you think when there's no obvious right answer. There are questions that separates people who perform. I know. These are questions that separates people who perform from people who are trusted. So let's get into it. Question one. Tell me about yourself. But imagine I'm skeptical. Let me get some water. That's fair. I I describe myself as someone who's earned confidence rather than assumed it. I've spent time in environments where responsibility mattered early: healthcare placements, professional settings, service roles, and competitive sports. What those taught me wasn't how to impress people, but how to behave when expectations are high and guidance is limited. I stayed calm, I take ownership of my contribution, and I reflect honestly about what I need to improve. That's the foundation of how I work. Question two. Tell me about a time you had to lead without certainty. One example was in a team sports environment where plans changed late and there wasn't a clear strategy going into a session. Rather than forcing direction I wasn't confident in, I focused on maintaining structure, keeping communication clear, effort high, and energy steady. That gave the team stability while decisions were clarified. It reinforced for me that leadership doesn't always mean having answers. Sometimes it means preventing chaos. Question three. What's the most uncomfortable feedback you've acted on? I was once told that my quietness in new environments could be mistaken for a lack of engagement. Internally, I knew I was thinking carefully, but I realized perception still mattered. I consciously worked on asking questions earlier and making my engagement more visible. Visible. That feedback was uncomfortable, but acting on it made me a more effective communicator and teammate. Question four. Tell me about a time you had to decide without enough information. This happened during a placement where supervision was limited and expectations weren't explicit. But rather than guessing or freezing, I relied on principles, safety, scope, and communication. I acted conservatively, documented clearly, and escalated where appropriate. That approach allowed me to contribute responsibly without overstepping, and it reinforced trust in my judgment. Question five. What's a failure that genuinely changed how you operate? A genuine failure was assuming that motivation would always carry me through self-directed projects. When progress stalled, it forced me to recognize that structure and discipline mattered more than enthusiasm. I rebuilt my approach around systems rather than motivation. That lesson has shaped how I now approach learning, training, and the long-term goals. Question six. What's something you deliberately don't do anymore? I no longer rush to prove myself. Earlier on, I felt pressure to demonstrate value immediately. Through professional and healthcare environments, I learned that reliability and judgment earn trust faster than speed or visibility. That shift has made my contributions more consistent and more sustainable. Question 7. What would make you hesitate before accepting responsibility? Yeah, we're on 30 minutes, but I'm just going to finish this set. I hesitate when responsibility isn't matched by clarity around expectations or support, not because I avoid accountability, but because I take it seriously. I want to understand the consequences of my actions and where escalation is appropriate. That caution helps me take responsibility properly rather than superficially. Question 8. How do you want to be remembered by the people you work with? I want to be remembered as someone dependable when things weren't straightforward. I'd want people to remember that I stayed calm, acted responsibly, and didn't make situations harder through ego or emotion. That reputation matters more to me than being seen as impressive in the moment. Okay, that's it. So that's set like 18 to 23 done. So yeah, that's half an hour of reading, and we're back again tomorrow. I'm just gonna keep doing it just to improve my articulation when speaking, just because like if I read long enough, like you're gonna become a better speaker somewhat. So yeah, back again tomorrow.